Hey everybody, it's Eric with Smart Pot Fabric Planners back with another episode of The Growing Revolution. And today's guest is Ben Owens, and we came across him via Instagram. He had been posting a lot of cool, uh, really visually appealing content of, cannabis flowers growing in smart pots. So, that obviously attracted our attention, and then we started following him and kind of learning a little bit more about him. I'd say he's a cannabis entrepreneur and a cannabis advocate, and we wanted to hear his story of how things are going out in Colorado. So welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I really appreciate being here. It's been fun getting to know you and interacting over the course of the last few months on Instagram. And I've been a big advocate of Smart Pot since I started using them. So always nice to be a part of it.
Appreciate that. So you're currently based in Colorado, but you've lived in other places around the country before that. Can you, introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your journey with cannabis, what it does for you, and what life was like before moving to Colorado.
Absolutely. So my name is Ben, obviously, and I'm a cannabis co-author. But I got my start as a copywriter and a journalist. Originally, I'm from Arizona, and I moved kind of all over the country, but ended up at Mizzou in Missouri for college in their J school. And from there, ended up, going through the Chicago ad agency scene and finding my way to Colorado, working in the counterculture side of things, which introduced me to and gave me kind of a professional freedom to be much more open about my cannabis usage and its relation to my daily life, my professional pursuits, things like that. And fast forward to now, I've written two books. We're on our third magazine. I've done a whole bunch of podcasts, and I've been actively posting on Instagram, like but I didn't start growing until I guess it's almost 3 years now, June of 19. So, I was a decade-long consumer before I ever, planted a seed. So it's been a wild journey, just even in that last 2, 3 years.
Nice. What motivated you to start growing your own?
So we gave up Netflix for a week. My girlfriend and I, the traditional pattern of coming home and being exhausted and just turning everything on and calling it a day and smoking and falling asleep. That routine was getting old. It was kind of I needed a change up, just a week off, and so we did different things every night. Board games, things like that we always have done, but just in a concentrated, intentional fashion. One of which was we went to Home Depot or Lowe's or one of those stores and grabbed a bunch of like basil and rosemary and all these kinds of plants with the like let's plant some plants and have house plants. I still have an aloe plant and a pothos from that night actually. But I was I'm not a green thumb, or so I said. I was very much the person who forgot to water plants and they always ended up dying. And I also had a ton of seeds. I knew working in the industry, I knew a lot of people, and occasionally I'd get kicked down a pack of seeds. So when I started growing and we started doing all this planting stuff, I was like, I'll just plant a couple seeds and see what happens. And you know, it got about this tall, and I started freaking out that the neighbors were going to notice it on the patio, and I wasn't supposed to be growing in my apartment complex, and it was going to be this whole big deal. And I kind of had that point where it was like, it either gets killed or it comes inside, and I buy a tent. And that was kind of the short version. I got a 2x2 and started growing in my closet, but it's a habit that has grown way beyond that now.
Nice. Yeah, I think, everybody who's a cannabis consumer, if they have the opportunity, should try growing it. If nothing
Absolutely.
else, to just have an appreciation for how difficult it is. Some people say, like, oh, growing cannabis is easy. And yes, I agree it is if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's a very, touchy and finicky plant, and mastering it, I would say, is not easy. It takes time and some research. So kudos to you for, trying it
Thank you.
out. And I haven't seen it personally, but just from pictures, it looks like you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I mean it's grown gradually. I'm still in tents. We're limited by plant count here in Colorado, so try to keep things legal as much as we can. Keep the cloners running all the time so that we don't have plants that are technically plants. But the goal has always been just a nuanced, little bit better every time. The first grow, my goal was literally to keep the plant alive from seed to harvest, and that was it. I encountered problems as most first time growers do. And, was it my best crop? No, it never, most people's first time never is. But over the course of the years, I've also been lucky to have the advice and feedback of a lot of older growers, people who've been doing this for 5, 10, 20 years. And that was a big resource too, because I was friends with some of these people way before I started growing strictly as a consumer. I knew them either because, I'd had their harvest or I just knew them through my events or things like that. And really getting an appreciation, like you said, I'm a big cannabis connoisseur. I'm a big hash smoker. I smoke a lot of concentrates, especially now that I've tried to cut backwoods out. That has led to, me trying to figure out the best way to produce that kind of quality for myself. And doing all the things internally it's been an incredible learning process, but it really shows you, like if you go to the store, you go to the dispensary, you buy a gram of hash, like if you're buying top shelf high end products, you really do start to appreciate why they carry these higher price points and what is involved. There's a lot of average weed on the market, both as flower and as concentrates. And, really seeing what goes into like that eighth of weed that you're throwing into a joint, or that ounce of weed that you smoked at the party. Like there's a lot of time that went into that. I just harvested again on my 2x2. I'm probably going to get an ounce and a half from that plant. It's not, it hasn't slowed my consumption necessarily, but it gives you an appreciation for what goes into, the rate at which you consume.
Yeah. I mean, I would say since I've been growing my own, if anything, my consumption's probably gone up. But I guess when you're growing your own, you can kind of dictate, how much you want to consume, and you're not, tied to dispensary prices.
Well, and up until this
Though it
year,
is cool to visit them on occasion.
it is, no, without question. And up until this year, I wasn't growing enough to be self-sufficient. Like I was in an apartment, I was growing in a very small manner, trying to keep it low key, but still trying to learn, So I would harvest and I'd have a couple ounces of great bud, but then I'd still be buying dispensary weed for 2, 3 months until my next harvest. So this year, I would say in the last 6 months, 7 months or so, I've really gotten to a point where, I was told I would get at some point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, hitting that self sufficiency point is, it's a big accomplishment, definitely.
Yeah.
So I was kind of looking through your bio, and you started the Cannaventure organization a while back, and that just sounds like a really cool concept. How did that start out, and how did that get rolling for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, this will be our 7th season throwing Cannaventure events. And largely that started as a way for me to meet other people. I worked remotely. I worked for a detox company. I was working for my buddy's startup in Illinois, but I was based here in Denver. And I just wanted to meet other people in the same way you'd meet coworkers or social outings, at an actual 9 to 5 physical location. So I figured it's Colorado, that there's legal weed, there's tons of places to go explore. There's got to be a group already doing this. Like, I can't be the first person to have thought to go hike and smoke a joint, but there wasn't. And I didn't understand why, and I was determined to do it. And after the first year, I was very clear why, and that is because it's very hard to legally host consumption events in public places. Basically, New York is the only place that even sort of quasi kinda lets you do it, but that's, depends on who you're running into. So
Right.
with that said, we had to kind of reevaluate and start doing these campouts, things that were where we could rent private property as opposed to relying solely on public lands, forests, things like that.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Having more freedom to kind of do what you want at these events is crucial. To getting people to show up and have a good time and
Well, and
be
I've always been that
responsible.
guy that's like, if there's not actually weed there, like it's not a weed event, you know. Like if it's at a bar or whatever, like if it's a weed event, it's a weed event, and there's weed there, and as a consumer, that was a very easy position to take. As a business owner and as an event host, it was a much harder position to take because there's a lot more legwork, and similarly with growing, like every little incremental step teaches you kind of why some of these beliefs that we may hold, as we learn more, may prove to be inaccurate or may prove to be, less than what we hoped.
Yeah. Yep. So your hikes kind of morphed into the campouts, and then I saw you guys are doing like disc and dabs disc golf tournaments. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Absolutely. So once we started renting private property, we started throwing two different series of events. One was our summer camps, which was a partnership with Denver Normal. Um, that was a great event. We did 3 years of it. COVID kind of squashed that, and we've been trying to bring it back, but everything in due time. And Dis and Dabs, we have been lucky enough to actually we expanded to Michigan last year, even in the middle of the pandemic. But it's a disc golf tournament that really started as an activity during the campout. We wanted a cannabis friendly campout that there was some sort of activity, and it really wasn't intended to be as it has developed, meaning, it has become a very big thing in the disc golf community, which I'm very appreciative of. Love the disc golf community, love the people who attend these events. But I personally was more on the Venn diagram side of the cannabis community than the disc golf side. Like I played disc golf, but it was an excuse to go outside and smoke bowls. It wasn't like I wasn't actively trying to get better, and it was just fun. And we've
Right.
really had a lot of people who are really good at disc golf come out to these events and really kind of put that stereotype down of the lazy stoner disc golf character, and really show that there's a lot of athleticism, there's a lot of professional people who actively consume cannabis and are active, really good disc golfers.
Yeah, I think disc golfing and cannabis are kind of hand in hand. And are there any thoughts to expanding to like other sports outside of disc golf, like traditional golf or anything else?
So we've talked about expanding to other sports. I really enjoy the disc golf scene, and I enjoy the overlap that it has shared with cannabis. Um, it's also a lot lower of an entry point from a physical cost. To get a couple discs and go hang out for the weekend is a lot less of an entry point than go get a set of clubs or something
Sure.
along those lines. With that said, we have done backpacking trips, and we have looked into the other thing that people don't understand sometimes is that there are things that you can do legally with alcohol that don't make sense on paper, but you cannot do those same things when you're smoking. Like a bike ride, for example, people always want us to do like a biking, camping kind of. We used to do them on the East Coast a lot. You'd go bike up the Appalachian Trail 10 miles, set up camp, and then bike back down. And it's a lot of fun, but if you're actively consuming, there's the potential that if a ranger stops you, you're no longer just going to get a consumption ticket, you're going to also get a DUI. So, we try to minimize any, like, is it going to happen for every occasion? No, but we try to minimize any potential of risk. So, things that are high risk activities like whitewater rafting and those kinds of activities that are a lot of fun, unfortunately, we don't have the bounds to play in. So, it's a navigating balance, but summer camp has been a great way to attract the non-disc golf scene, and I think if possible, we'd love to bring summer camp to other states. I've tried to bring Dis and Dabs to other states. We've gotten it to do Michigan, as I said, and then we were working on Oklahoma. And every market is slightly different. We've had some issues with townships not being super friendly to the idea of a mandatory consumption tournament coming to their little town of the woods. But we power through it. The thing that I will say is that it's been a long road because what we've tried to do is do everything by the book legally and still satisfy some of those wants from the traditional scene, the traditional market, the ability to consume, the ability to share with one another, things like that. And so we honor what Colorado's laws are, but at the same time, we're trying to create the best experience in a legal manner so that when the cops do show up, which they have absolutely shown up to our events, we can walk them around, we can show them the paperwork, we can talk to them and say, hey, you can walk around and talk to anybody here, and you're not going to find a problem that gives you a reason to shut this down. And that's not a comfort that, we've always had, nor do we have in any, every state right now.
Makes sense. Yeah, if you're just, walking in the woods smoking a joint, that's one thing. But if you're
30
organizing
people.
cannabis events and you got, a bunch of people showing up, then there's, a whole lot of other issues between, business liability and state issues. Yeah, so it sounds like you're doing a great job of navigating the red tape.
It's a fine line, but we try to walk it like a tightrope.
Yeah, you have to, and that's part of the fun of it, right?
Yeah,
So you had
absolutely.
mentioned that you had authored some books as well. Can you tell us about what you've written about?
Absolutely. So the first book I wrote was Stoner Survival, and it's a kind of a quick reference survival guide for the cannabis consumer. In throwing these hikes and campouts, I quickly realized that my background as a Boy Scout, my background camping frequently with my family, going on hikes and things like that, was not necessarily as common, even though it was a state where there was this huge, abundance of nature and trails and things. So when we started doing the campouts, or the summer camp, we tried to create like curriculums, where that were kind of like the accepted movie where they all kind of write what they want to learn on the board. But the idea being, wherever the overlap was with cannabis, try to provide that. So, cannabis meditation, cannabis fitness, cannabis yoga, things like that, alternative health. And one of which was this term, this class, Stoner Survival, which my goal was, knots, fire, hiking etiquette, those kinds of basics for the outdoors. And we kind of put together this pamphlet that was just me, finding other things throughout the internet and putting them into a big stapled pad for me to just talk about, and took that outline of topics and really turned it into a book that wasn't necessarily meant as any sort of profit driver, but was absolutely meant as a default tool that I could point to as a hiking leader that said, if you want to carry something in your pack that's not super heavy, I think it's under 100 pages. It might be like 101. I actually have the book right here. But yeah, that was the idea. It was just quick and easy. It's not in depth. It's not going to save your life. There's definitely more to it, and it doesn't teach you how to smoke either. Like, there are some things in there about rolling cannagars and things like that. But the assumption going into the book is you already know how to get high. Like, this isn't the book that's like, hey, this is weed 101. Like, it's just specifically targeted for that niche. And second book I wrote was a mushroom cookbook, which I started developing before COVID, was doing mushroom dinners, and then COVID happened, kind of had to stop doing that. Still was able to finish with the recipes that we had tested at the dinners and get the book out. But, hoping to kind of revamp that as well now that Denver has decriminalized. It's made it a lot more accessible to a lot of people, especially with
So are
COVID
those are
sitting at
those
home.
medicinal mushrooms then in your
Yeah, so
cookbook?
those are magic mushrooms. Yeah, so Denver decriminalized, which was a pretty cool thing, and everyone I know that was growing cannabis started growing mushrooms, and so I have not tried, nor do I, but it's fascinating, and the ability to eat mushrooms in a format other than choking down a bag of dry mushrooms with a beer kind of mentality that college taught us is a very different experience now. So we would do a 4-course meal. There'd be ceviche. You'd finish with a dessert. It would be a very different experience than most people are accustomed to when they eat mushrooms. But it was a fun learning experience. It's definitely, like, cannabis is definitely 99% of what I do, but it was a fun thing to dabble in. And,
Nice.
since then, I've had a newsletter that I've written. I'm doing this magazine, really trying to stay current with the publication of as much information as we can.
Yeah, I subscribe to your newsletter. There's a lot of good content in there. Now, what are you doing magazine wise?
So Ethos Genetics is a client of mine, and I co-author with Colin, who I'm sure some of your audience will know.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, I had the privilege of doing a profile for the Hemp Connoisseur back when the Hemp Connoisseur was doing print publications pre-COVID. And through that interview process and that profile, got to know him, got to know his team, ended up doing a profile on his COO, Riley. She's an incredible person. And once that kind of ran its course as contracts, Colin really wanted to get into the publishing side of things and start putting pen to paper, so to speak. And that evolved into a magazine. So originally we were just publishing for the web, and we published the first issue kind of as an idea for an annual issue. Nothing, it was a first foray into a magazine. And we have done now, volume 2 came out, and volume 3 is actually at the printer as of this week. So we are excited. It'll go out in April to his fan club and then be available for sale a month later. So, but it's
Nice.
very, we've got Peachy OG. I don't know if you know who that is. It's Wiz Khalifa's mom. She's a huge cannabis advocate, drug war reform advocate, just genuinely nice person. We've got, a variety of different people who their stories aren't necessarily stories that you've heard. Lovin' in Her Eyes is another great example. Everybody on the internet, especially if you're on Instagram and you're a grower, you've probably heard of Lovin'. I got to sit down and talk with Lovin' and her team, and that's not an opportunity that everyone gets, and so it's something I'm very grateful for, and has also given me a chance to learn as a grower, what these people are doing and what their, setups look like or what their tactics are, or some of those aside comments that don't end up in the article, but definitely end up helping out in the grow.
Yeah, I think media, interviewing people, and then what we're doing with the Growing Revolution podcast is just really been a personal blessing to me. Like, getting to talk to people and expand my own knowledge base on plant science and cannabis, but also traditional fruits, vegetables, and herbs. It's just been beyond a blessing. So talking to people like yourself, this is the highlight of my day, to be quite honest.
Absolutely. No, I love
Um,
it. I mean, I love having these conversations.
Yeah. So what are you like, besides the magazine, do you have your eye on anything, for expanding Cannaventures, or, what are you looking at going forward for yourself?
So, this year we have our season opener for the seventh annual season of Cannaventure. That's the Saturday after 420. Usually we go before 420, but this year it's Easter, and why force the overlap? Everybody can kind of, have their fun celebrations and then come out the next weekend. Then we've got, excuse me, Distant Dabs Labor Day weekend. That is selling quickly. Our VIP sold out. We still have some camping available with VIP Plus, but also have some GA tickets that are great if you don't want to camp on site. You want to camp nearby or to stay at a hotel. And also, I have a third book in the works. It's been largely tabled because I've been fairly busy with all these other publications, but that the goal is to get that book out as well sometime in the near future. And we're hosting monthly events. We do either a hike or a camp out every month. And so, I'm gauging interest on doing another backpacking trip. I really enjoy doing backpacking trips. They're not for everyone. I learned that the first time we tried to throw it. We usually get 20, 30 people on a hike. We got 4 people that came backpacking. It's just not for everybody. And some people don't have the gear for it either. And so trying to do that. But yeah, I would say, I'm traveling. I'm going to CannaCon at the end of this month in Oklahoma City. I'm going to LA right after that. I'm hitting Arizona. We're doing the hike. Then I go to Vegas. So, I'm doing a lot of travel, trying to get out there and cover new markets, especially emerging markets that either recently came online or are trying to transition from medical to rec.
Awesome. Good. Always good to stay busy.
Yeah.
So I have kind of a last question that might be a little personal. What are your thoughts on couples and cannabis in terms of compatibility, and how has that
Oh, man.
impacted your life, either positively or negatively?
So I don't know if you know the backstory to the question you just asked, but this is great. Okay, so I was married at one point to someone who absolutely hated weed. So I'm like a 10 on the scale of weed. She was like a negative 10. And it was like it's crazy to think about. This was, years ago, and it was short-lived, it didn't last very long for obvious reasons, but it pushed me to do certain things that I wouldn't have done if I was in a relationship that was very, cool with cannabis. So, like, for example, Cannaventure was me trying to meet other people because the social gatherings that I was going to as couples were largely people who weren't smoking or weren't smoking in those couples settings. So I was trying
Mm-hmm.
to find something else and create that other thing. Now, it probably would have happened in some other manner, even if I'd been in a good relationship. But fast forward to now, I've been in a steady, happy relationship where the person that I love and am dating smokes as much, if not more, than I do. We are regularly keeping up with one another and putting it, to our limits. So that has been incredible because as I've grown, both as a consumer, as an industry professional, going to gatherings, going to things like that, events, big award shows, those kinds of things, but also as I grow as a grower, and not having to make these concessions or wagers or whatever with someone who's not necessarily interested in the idea of having plants being grown in their house. Having someone who's just as passionate about the plant, who's dedicated their life to the plant, has made a huge difference in my ability to grow as a cannabis consumer, as a professional, as a grower. So I would absolutely say, it's possible. I have really good friends and they do it. I wouldn't say they're as far polar opposites as I was in my past life, but they definitely, one of them doesn't smoke at all, or one of them will hit a bowl every, New Year's Eve kind of thing. And then the other person is definitely the heavy consumer and they make it work. I would say if you are very passionate about cannabis, if cannabis is your entire life, it's much harder to do than if, you're just the weed guy in the office or, the guy that everybody knows might have something on him. That's very different than if you're committed to the industry, you're actively putting your name out and saying I'm affiliated with a substance that's not legal everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote, and I think, yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, if the other partner at least has a tolerance for it, if they don't partake, that's one thing. If they can at least respect the other partner's choices, but if the other partner is diametrically opposed to cannabis and you enjoy cannabis, like, you're going to either have to, make a concession or, maybe that isn't the right relationship long term. So,
And if you're
I,
gonna
I
make it
was
work,
I was with you in that boat many years ago, and I made the right choice. There were other compatibility issues as well, but uh,
always are.
who knows? Maybe
It's not
she's
just one
watching.
thing.
Yeah.
But no, I
So
totally get what you're saying.
yeah. The couple that partakes together and the couple that grows together is probably going to be the couple that stays together. So
And in any couple
congratulations to
situation,
finding a good partner.
communication. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And communication, like whether you're going into that relationship or whether you're coming out as a cannabis consumer in that relationship, like not just saying like, "Hey, I smoke pot," but if there are objections or concerns or things, having those open conversations, especially not stoned, that definitely helps. Present your best face. If cannabis helps you articulate, by all means. But as you and I talked even before this call, like it's not always beneficial if you're trying to communicate and articulate what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Cannabis can be really beneficial in thinking outside the box, but then pulling those ideas back into your brain uh, isn't possible for everybody, I guess. So I guess on that note, this has been a really cool, interesting conversation for me. How can people, get in touch with you and follow you on, online?
So cannabinoid with an E instead of an I, as in Ben. That's my Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitter. Most of the platforms that it hadn't already been claimed. Cannabinoid.com, same spelling. That's my newsletter. I would love people who are interested signed up. Sorry, that's my husky in the background. Um, I write every week, and I have extra content that I try to provide for my premium subscribers. Whether it's grow related or cannabis related or industry related, that's definitely a great place to find me. You can also just reach out directly. Ben at creativebenefits.org is a great way to. That's my direct email. So anybody who has a question, wants to chat, I may not get to it immediately. I try to be pretty responsive, but that's the best way to get directly a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, Ben, it was really great to get to know you, at least online. Looking forward to meeting you in person, hopefully sooner than later, sharing a sesh with you. And thank you for joining us on The Growing Revolution.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking to you soon.